All right, guys, good evening in India, and we are live once more amidst this crisis which is going on all over the world and threatening our lifestyle, our motorcycling lifestyle. And I don't even remember last when I rode a motorcycle. It was, I think, more than a month ago. And ever since, all my bikes, all our motorcycles are just in the garage. We are unable to ride them. And talking about riding motorcycles, I mean, for people like us, it is obviously very difficult. But imagine someone if he tells you that he was going to take part in Isle of Man, and that Isle of Man in 2020 gets cancelled. What would be going on in his mind? Can you imagine if you're going to race in Isle of Man and you cannot because of a virus? So there is this gentleman with us right now from halfway across the world, or rather, across the world. And he's a very special gentleman because people don't know about him a lot yet. But he's one of the fastest men on two wheels on planet Earth. That is what I believe, because he's won one of the toughest races on two wheels, road races that you can imagine. So a lot of us, a lot of you don't know what this race is all about. Let me actually explain before we get that gentleman over here. So it is called the Pikes Peak, or the Race to the Clouds race, as you can see on your screen. It's just 20 kilometers, but those 20 kilometers, they have 156 turns. And once you get from the bottom to the top, the elevation change, the change in temperature, the change in all sort of microclimatic conditions is so huge that a lot of things keep changing. Just let me cut it short and let you know that it is one of the toughest races on the planet to test how well you can corner, and that also, it's one side mountain. So if you fall, you're gone. According to me, it's even more dangerous than the Isle of Man. Now, coming back, let me actually get that gentleman right over here on the screen. So please welcome Rennie from America, all the way from Los Angeles. It's early morning, Rennie.
Yeah.
Good morning to you.
How you doing?
And but if you were in Australia, but you're an Australian, by the way,
Yes.
you would be fast asleep right now.
So, actually, yeah. It's whatever it is, 8 o'clock in the morning here now. So
yes.
Yeah, all good.
So tell me, Rennie, first of all, it's again an honor to speak to you, because winning the Pikes Peaks race is not a joke, and you have done it. You are on the top, literally pun intended. And can you tell me a little bit more about your win and how you actually started Pikes Peak?
Well, yeah, the win came about, from we teamed up with Aprilia last year, and then like the previous 3 years, we had raced with KTM North America, and I got the win in the heavyweight division, which was my goal, I guess you could say, for the last few years, because Colin Dunn unfortunately fell off and suffered fatal injuries. We ended up winning the overall, which wasn't really our, I guess, intention. I guess, I mean, clearly not with Colin, but our goal was to win the heavyweight class, and then everyone combines depending on what class you're in, and then goes to the overall. And Colin was on a fairly significantly faster bike than what we were, and was riding it very, very well. Plus, he was in a different category. So, yeah, I mean, it was tragic how it all came about. He was a really, really good guy. But for me, I started my first race was in 2016 on the KTM Super Duke, 1290 Super Duke R, where myself and Tom Moen from KTM North America, who looks after the media department, we basically just turned up with a van and a bike and had absolutely no idea what we were doing. We had no idea about the schedules. We had no idea about the tires that you use. It's how massive the event really is. So that was a bit of an eye opener. And unfortunately, I crashed in that year while I was in the lead. I'd qualified on pole, and qualified on pole by about 4 seconds too. So I was pretty much all right at that point, and I psyched myself out, unfortunately, and hit the wall. But I was very lucky, incredibly lucky in terms of crashes at Pikes Peak. Basically dirt tracked the bike into the wall at 100 20 odd mile an hour or so. By the time I hit the wall, I wasn't going that quick, but bounced over the top of the Armco and landed on the edge of the cliff. But this, so obviously I had to come back. And then 2017, finished second to my good friend Chris Fillmore for the KTM North America 1-2, which was really, really cool. And then in 2018, I missed out by 0.6 of a second to Colin Dunn, which is the closest finished in the history of the in 100 years of the race, car or bike. So it sucked to be on the wrong end of that. And last year we got it done.
So, Rennie, this is you winning. But obviously, you didn't know that you were winning the race when this photo was shot, or did you know already? But anyway, what was going through in your mind when this exact movement was happening?
Probably, thank God I've got to the top. I mean, that's the overriding feeling you get when you get to the top of Pikes Peak, because it is so dangerous. Like where that shot was taken, Colin Dunn fell off just before that and went down the cliff, unfortunately. And so there's the danger aspect is enormous. So to get to the top, I mean, that's the first thing. Like, you just want to get there, and it's when you do cross that line, it's this huge relief. I mean, I knew through the practices and then into the race itself, I knew from that run that it was a good run. Like, I could just tell that, you just know when you hit your marks and when things are flowing and when they're working well. There was a couple of mistakes that I made that cost me a bit of time. I reckon probably overall, I probably lost about 5 seconds that I could have easily made up, let alone maybe another 3 or 4 on top of that, just through little increments here and there. But there was one fairly significant screw up which lost me a couple of seconds, and then another one later in the run. But I knew it was still a good run. In my 2017 run, I did a 9-minute 57, I think 57.6 or something, and that was the 3rd or 4th time a rider in the history of the race has gone on to 10 minutes. So that was pretty cool. And I knew the run was faster than that, but I didn't think it was 13 seconds faster. I mean, 13 seconds is a hell of a long time in terms of racing. I mean, light years in terms of racing, but I was pretty pumped when my friend Chris Fillmore was there and had his arms in the air and cheering me on as I came out. So I knew something. I knew I was good at that point. So it was a nice feeling.
See, Rennie, when I wanted to write that you are one of the fastest men on the planet on 2 wheels, you were quite humble and you said that please don't write that. Now I have a direct question at you. Racing is very objective. You won it. How difficult it is for someone to win something like the Pikes Peak, because you're one of the very few people and the first Australian to do that. So when I say that you're one of the fastest people on 2 wheels, am I wrong? It's a difficult question to answer, I know, but people got to know what it goes into it, right?
I guess it depends on what you define as fast, really. I mean, like, for the thing with Pikes is it's a very different mindset than what you have with traditional circuit racing, for example. And because Pikes is just one event versus, say, a season of superbike racing or whatever, it's almost easier to convince people, especially like my work, for example, to just go and say, I'm going to go do a season of superbike racing, because then you're consistent, every couple of weeks you're going racing. Whereas with Pikes, it's very much it's a one-time deal, and the whole year's worth of racing or practicing or building bikes or whatever it is that you're doing, it was basically every weekend for us for 6 months leading up to the race. It's trying to condense all that into one run, and you only ever get one crack at it. So the pressure on it is quite huge. Your pressure on you is quite big to be able to, and I cracked in 2016 last year I didn't, thankfully, but you're condensing all that into one little run, and in practice, you never get to do the bottom you never get to do the start line to the finish line. You in practice, you only do the first third of the mountain and the last third of the mountain and then the middle third. And then on the last day of practice, they choose one of the three. And that's your kind of like a wild card practice. So you get 2 practices on one section and 1 practice for the rest of the sections. So you're always like watching videos and like analyzing the pavement and where the rocks are and where the cracks in the pavement are and the road conditions as well. The snow on the side of the road a lot of the time, especially when you get to the top of the midsection, there's always snow. So you got to look for where the snow is running across the road. You know, a lot of things. But yeah, it is a bit of a pressure cooker, I guess. Some guys like it, other guys sort of don't. But I mean, it's a pretty special place. You know, it's one of those times when everything's flowing good there, and that's what the whole thing's about. It's all just flowing. It's all just linking one corner to the next. It's fast road riding, really. And, you know, once they're flowing and you're ripping up the side of America's mountain on a superbike, it's a pretty cool feeling.
Yeah, I can imagine. You know, talking about bumps and corners and trying to figure out all these variables, like microclimates, as you call them, on the mountain. You know, let's talk about Colin Dunn, because he was your friend and he was, I think, multiple times winner on the mountain with different kind of motorcycles, like an electric bike, and then, of course, the Multistrada and stuff like that. So in 2019, when he won, it was the same race, same movement, I think, that claimed Colin Dunn, like the mountain claimed him. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because the fear of death might always be there at the back of your mind, you know, when you're racing.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, Colin was a very special guy. I mean, excuse me. He was very much how do I say this? Like, he was a rider. And he was one of those guys that could ride anything. He had ambitions of going to the Isle of Man, actually, and I think that was what he was planning to do this year. But you know, Colin was a lovely, lovely guy. You know, no airs or graces, and was a very, very humble dude. And so, you know, we got along very well, and he helped me out a lot in the first year that I was there. So in 2016, the Ducati did a thing called the Squadra Alpina program, where, you know, Colin had obviously won for Ducati, twice, I think, at that point, twice or something like that. And so Ducati then sponsored the race and did a rookies thing, which was really, really helpful for guys on their first year. And so when I went there, I had Colin and another guy, Greg Tracy, who were helping me out. And anyway, so anyway, we got to know each other through that, and you know, we did a bit of. A week before last year's race, myself and Colin and Chris Fillmore were out riding supermotos together. That thing behind me, we were out riding supermotos together at the go-kart track, and yeah, he was just a great guy. And but he knew the dangers. I mean, this is the thing. I mean, it sounds callous and it sounds cold, but it's the truth. Like, you don't go into that race or a race like that, or the Isle of Man, or the bloody Northwest 200, or whatever it is, or Macau Grand Prix. You don't go into it. No one's forcing you to go into it. You're acutely aware that if you screw up, probably the best case scenario is you're going to get hurt. And that's, you know, I mean, that makes my crash in 2016 even more lucky. The fact that all I had was a hematoma on my arm was pretty astounding. Colin knew the dangers better than anybody. He was under a bit of pressure, I think, at Ducati, because they were using that race, like Ducati in Italy was using that race to effectively launch the Street Fighter, the new Street Fighter. Colin's bike was a V4 Panigale. It was a very hot V4 Panigale too. I mean, the thing was just a missile of a motorcycle. So his was a full-blown superbike. That's why he had to run in the exhibition class, along with Lucy Glockner as well. Lucy Glockner is the German lady who's just unbelievably fast, and she had an HP race, the carbon-framed HP race with a four-wheel superbike motor in there. So those guys were in a different class. But yeah, they were. It's hard to say. I mean, like, you know the dangers. when we're up the top, we got given all kinds of mixed messages. And this is the problem that is you cannot get away with when you're talking about Pikes Peak or mountain racing, I guess, where you can't see the course, is that one person says one thing, another person says another thing. And of course the mixed messages get mixed, and then it just spirals down the hill. And we got told everything when we were on top of that mountain, from he's completely fine to he's in the back of an ambulance to he's in a medevac helicopter on life support to he's just sitting over on the rocks over there, to everything. But the overriding thing that we heard from multiple people was that he was going to be okay. I've even got a video of me. I'm talking to my GoPro, and a guy comes up to me. He's like, "Yep, he's all right. He's bashed up, but he's going to be okay." And that was all we were worried about. Like, as long as your back and your brain are okay, pretty much everything else can be screwed, and you'll be all right. That'll repair itself. So that was all we were concerned about, was that he could walk and that he could think, walk and talk. And anyway, we left there. Well, for the next few hours, we were like, okay, cool, he's going to be all right. And then all of a sudden we got told he was killed. And it was just this, I mean, talk about letting the air out of the room. It was just, we couldn't believe it. I mean, he was by far the best rider ever to race Pikes Peak. I mean, he was flying on that run. He was going really fast. Like, I went fast and he was going a lot quicker than me. And, call it a faster bike or whatever. I mean, Colin and I were pretty evenly matched, I think, in terms of speed. But, there was just something about Colin and Pikes Peak. Those two just worked together. He could ride that Multistrada, that Pikes Peak Multistrada, way faster than that thing had any right to go. I sat on that bike and I'm like, no thanks. But he was a big guy too, big tall guy, big strong guy. He was probably 6'2", I'd say. So, big dude and bigger than you'll be for a super bike kind of deal. So that's why I think Multistrada really worked for him, because that too is a big bike as well. And just that place in Carlin just clicked. And yeah, what do you say? It's a terrible thing, but that's racing.
Well, Rennie, now the thing is that a lot of people don't know about Pikes Peak. And I was doing some research on Carlin, and apparently he also did not know about Pikes Peak unless and until actually someone asked him to come as a person over there just to watch the race. And would you credit Ducati for making a Pikes Peak edition and making the Pikes Peak in general more popular? Because and do you think that when they came out with the Pikes Peak edition, it was because of Carlin Dunn? And subsequently, do you think that they should come out with a tribute edition for Colin Dunn?
It's tough because, I mean, for sure he was instrumental in making the Pikes Peak bike. I mean, look, if Colin didn't win Pikes Peak on a Ducati Multistrada, there wouldn't be the Pikes Peak Multistrada edition that you could buy. That's for sure. It's hard because making tribute bikes for guys, I mean, this is going to sound really awful, but making tribute bikes for guys that were killed on that bike, I just don't see it happening. I mean, yeah, look, it would be great if they made 5 Ducati Street Fighters and called them the CD edition, and they only ever made 5 because number 5 was his racing number. That would be cool. That's up to Ducati if they want to do that. I can't see it happening. If Carlin had won and crossed the finish line, for sure they'd be doing it. Absolutely, they would be doing it, because then you're touting success. You're promoting the fact that you went and kicked everyone's ass at Pikes Peak, and for sure, then yeah, why not make 10 of them, make 100 of them, make 500 of them. But when you then got to look at this is a tribute bike to a guy that was, you're riding a bike, you bought a Ducati Street Fighter about a guy who was killed on a Ducati Street Fighter. It doesn't really have the same marketing clout, unfortunately, I don't think.
Yes, because we'll get back to the fact that the picture in which you're interviewing Nicky Hayden,
yep.
Because I've got that Nicky Hayden tribute helmet, so that idea came into my mind with that. Now coming back to you, how did you start racing, and when were your first race, and on which motorcycle?
Well, I suppose I've started. I mean, my family has been involved in racing and riding for 3 generations now. And my grandfather was a motocross champion, and so was my dad. Mum used to race and all kinds of stuff. So I was kind of fed into it, really. My first race was when I think I was 13 or something. I didn't start till later in terms of racing than a lot of guys do. A lot of kids are racing by the time they can walk. And it was Dad never wanted me to be a pro racer. So it was, certainly was never good enough to be a pro racer. They didn't have the money to do it, and I didn't have the talent. So we just did a bit of club motocross throughout my teenage years. And then I started road racing when I was 17 or 18. I had my first road race actually on a 500 BSA, an old classic 500 BSA, 1963, I think the bike was. So there you go, that's a shot. So that was fun, and but I had a right foot gear change, and it was just a weird thing to ride, and I had no idea what I was doing. And then later on, we got a RGV 250, Suzuki RGV 250, which I wish I still had. Raced that for a few years, crashed my brains out a bunch of times, and then I stopped because a friend of mine, Reece Bansell, was killed at Eastern Creek in Australia, or what's now Sydney Motorsports Park in Australia. And it kind of coincided with a point in my life where I was just like, I don't care about this anymore. And so I went off and partied and did all that dumb stuff for a while. But then, I fell into journalism, and I missed motorcycles so much, and I wanted to reignite that dream, I guess, of getting paid to ride motorbikes, and it certainly wasn't going to happen by being a racer. So the next thing was to become a bike journalist. So I always enjoyed writing. Again, come from a family of writers. My dad still runs the Old Bike Australasia, which is one of the most successful classic motorcycle mags in the world now. So I ended up doing that, and it's taken me from the moment I started studying in 2007 to now, 2020. So what, 13, 14 years. I actually got my first job at Rapid Bikes magazine, which isn't around anymore, but it's taken me all around the world. I've been so lucky. It's taken me through Asia. I'm now living in America as a result. And, it's been really, really cool. I've met some of the guys that I looked up to who have been wonderful, wonderful people. I've also met guys that I looked up to that haven't been so great. But I've ridden some of the best bikes in the world. I've ridden some of the best racetracks in the world, like a bunch of MotoGP racetracks that I've only ever seen on TV. So I count myself very lucky to have been able to do it. And the racing side of things just works into work effectively. Like I can get out there and have a race, and I ride this thing behind me, or I'll go race do an endurance race here and there, or I'll do a super bike race, or I'll do a super sport race with a 600 I've got in the garage, and just whatever I can. And then decided to be a little silly and go and try the Isle of Man, which didn't happen, but we'll hopefully be back next year. And then just do as much as we can while do it while the fun lasts. And then once the journalism thing stops, we'll go and figure out something else.
But tell us about this one. This is very interesting.
So that shot was taken at Symonds Plains Raceway. You can see it's the Rapid Bikes magazine. That's the FZ6 Cup in Australia, which doesn't run anymore. It was a one.
So that's the FZ6. I thought that was FZ1.
Right, yeah, okay. 6, yeah. So there was a one-make series that ran for a few years in Australia, which was everyone was on the same tyres, Dunlop tyres, and everyone had the same bike, an FZ6. And it was just, God, it was fun. It was so much fun. And we all were a little traveling kind of circus. We all were in around the country together, and that was the first year I did a full season of racing, really, a full national championship at least, and had a great time. Had such a fun time, and learned a lot about how to ride, and try and set the bike up a bit better. And it was a really, really cool time, that. And
what about this?
That shot was taken at a racetrack called Chuckwalla out here in California. and that was a bike that we built with Kawasaki, Kawasaki USA, and it was basically a super stock spec Kawasaki, and I went out there and won on it against a bunch of kids that race in the Moto America Championship and all that, which I thought was all right for an overweight bike journo. So we went out and did this race, did a few of them, and it was part of a story that we did with Jason Pridmore, who is a very famous ex-racer, runs one of the biggest riding schools out here in the States. And so we went and did that, and basically I did one race and then did his school and then did another race, and just to see the difference in my riding and my times. And it was really, really good fun though. First time I'd first time I'd raced a proper superbike. Obviously I'd raced a super stock spec CBR 1000 a few years prior to that, and I raced a lot of 600s. 600s I've done most racing on, I think, in general. Anyway, so they gave us that bike. I went out and won on it, and went on to the next thing. So that was a really fun little bike. That had a good time on that.
Okay, so I want to know that you were going to participate in Isle of Man.
Mm-hmm.
Now, because it's cancelled, can you tell us something more, that what kind of planning, what kind of motorcycle, if you can divulge?
So I still will be. I'm going to race next year. So originally I was going to ride I still am. I'm going to ride for the PRF racing team, which is run by a guy called Paul Rennie. Even spells the same as me, which is kind of cool. But he runs PRF racing, which has been at the Isle of Man now since 1995, I'm going to say. Riding a G6R 600 in the Supersport TT. I went over to the Isle of Man in November of last year to do basically a week in the car, in the hire car, and so got out there and did all that, and that was really, really cool. I mean, that was a real eye opener. That was one of those times where, a bit like Pikes, where you go and see it in the eye, and you're like, okay, let's do this. It's a big, like, there's a lot of guys that went there that didn't want to do it, and it's certainly that's the dragon. That's going face to face with the beast at the Isle of Man. Like, you just don't. I mean, even at road speeds, I didn't really comprehend how fast the place really is. When you hit it, everyone tells me that when you hit it at speed the first time, it's just just blows your socks off kind of thing. So, unfortunately, it all fell apart this year, which is a real bummer, because at that point I had been racing a fair bit. I had done a lot of racing towards the end of last year on a lot of different bikes, and this year I'd been using a CBR 600 to keep myself sharp, and I had a bunch of races lined up. I was actually supposed to be racing last weekend. They had a race out here that isn't happening anymore. So I was going to be out doing that and getting ready, and then I was going to be flying over to the Isle of Man on the 27th, I think, of May, or 26th, of May, and then I was going to be there for 2 weeks. Do 2 races and do all the stories and all that stuff that we do as bike journos, and move on from there. So I still will be racing, provided the situation here keeps going along and we've still got a job. And the plan is to go back there and just move everything forward a year. But the Isle of Man for me is not a thing like Pikes Peak. I'm not going there to win it. I'll be 38 by that stage, and I'm past my best in terms of being able to race and win at the Isle of Man. Like, if I'd gone there 10 years ago, I might have had a shot and would have probably had the ability to come back year after year. Now I've got a 2-year-old boy and all that, and it's too hard. So I wanted to make sure that I did it before I stopped racing, and I'm hoping that it'll all just kind of neatly slot into a following year, and I can tick that one off and go and experience the Isle of Man as a racer and also as a spectator.
Well, I really hope that not only you race, but you also win. And if you win, it's going to put you in the mainstream. It's like you're going to go up, like, everyone's going to know you. And I really, wish you all the best in that. But tell me something about this. Why did you choose this bike for the Pikes Peak? This is Aprilia Tuno.
Yeah.
And what kind of modifications did you make to the bike?
Quite a few. Basically, the ride came about because it was I was actually approached by Aprilia to head up their team. There were a bunch of people that wanted to get on Aprilias, and they didn't want to run with them. And then they approached me and said, "Do you want to come and head our team?" And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely," because KTM at that stage were not going to do another bike. As we all know, the 2020 Super Duke came out, and they didn't want to build another bike for the previous edition, because our race bike from 2017-18 was getting a bit tired, and they just didn't want to deal with it. And I was like, yep, fair enough. And so I was either going to not race, or I had even had very, very light a conversation with Yamaha about maybe doing one of their bikes, because their MT10 would have been a really good bike for that place. Anyway, Aprilia approached me, and I said yes in a heartbeat. And so off we went. We fitted basically, again, a super stock spec, although because it is the 1100, it's not a proper super sport spec, the Superbike spec. People get kind of confused. They hear 1100 versus 1000 Superbike, and they automatically think 1100 is going to be faster, but that's not true. An Aprilia RSV4, you're looking at 180 plus 190 horsepower. We had, at altitude, we had bang on 160. I saw that on the dyno multiple times. So we ran, what did we do? We ran different race fuel. I can't remember exactly the fuel that we ran, but it was mixed fuel, because we had an oxygenated rule where you couldn't run oxygenated fuel. So we did that. We had Power Commander. We also had a different ECU. Now, that was the biggest change for us, was that even with all the electronics switched off to effectively have like level 1 traction control, and that's it, and the full race map and all that stuff, I still wasn't getting the immediate throttle response that I wanted, especially coming out of hairpins. Like, you crack the throttle and you're like, go. Like, I don't want any lag, anything. The thing would have maybe a quarter of a second or maybe a little bit less of just, it wouldn't immediately go when I opened the throttle. And it came down to the electronics for holding the bike back. And so Aprilia, we basically said to Aprilia after the first practice day, we're like, look, this isn't going to go much faster than this. If you guys want to win this, we're saying this to Aprilia in Italy, like, if you guys want to win this, we need electronics. And so amazingly, they wrote a new map for a new ECU in Italy, and they flew their technician over that night from Italy to Pikes Peak. And the next morning, he turns up there with this big red ECU and plugs that in. He goes, all right, go ride that. I went, all right. And boom, we're out of there. And then I was like, oh, okay. And it's like the bike just woke up, which was really cool. And off we went. So that was the biggest change. In terms of suspension, we put RSV4 1100 factory front and rear suspension. So actually street bike suspension. We didn't even change the springs, because one of the things that we wanted, we revalved the shock, but one of the things that we wanted was to have a bike that was a little bit more compliant. The KTMs were set up very, very stiff, and I think too stiff in the end. They just didn't have the compliance over the bumps that we were wanting. So for me, it was better to have a street bike set up, and that's what I'm more used to anyway, being a bike tester. And I prefer to have a slightly softer setup and let things soak up the bumps a bit better. So we did that. We put a full fairing on it, which I still don't necessarily agree with, but they wanted to put one on there for the streamlining sort of aspect. I wanted a half fairing, just to keep the naked bike aspect of it a little bit. But anyway, they went with that. And what else did we do? We put a thumb rear brake on it, which was an excellent thing. Don't know why I hadn't done that in all my previous race bikes. So did that. We had just the usual things, rear sets and levers and bar. Oh, it's not, it had a standard center handlebar. Ran Shark Skins bodywork on it, and we had the bike painted in Denver by a group called Syndicate Racing. And Pirelli obviously gave us a stack of tires. Without those guys, that thing never would have happened. So yeah, it was a just nice little mods. Nothing too crazy. Bike was very, very good as the standard bike anyway, as we all know. The Aprilia Tuono is a beast of a thing. So it was just kind of improving what we already had and making sure that it was well suited for the mountain.
But if you had to choose one thing, which is the most important thing on the motorcycle for you?
Tires.
Tires?
Yeah.
Well, I
say tires, but it's two things really. It's tires and suspension. It's a little different with Pikes because Pikes is like that. You need motor. Like you've got to have horsepower. If you don't, and that's why Colin, aside from Colin's amazing riding, that's one of the reasons why that thing was so fast. Is because he had huge horsepower. You just can't beat horsepower when you're going up a hill. It's simple as that. But you still need to have the suspension and the tires. Tires are like, in terms of a racing motorcycle, tires are the number one thing. You can do whatever you want to suspension, you can do whatever you want to the motor, to the chassis, whatever. But if you cannot get the power down and those black things don't grip, it's all for nothing. Suspension, especially at Pikes, because it is so bumpy, was a big thing as well. And I realized how far out the ballpark was when I rode the Aprilia. I was like, oh, this is how it's supposed to be, how bad I was on the KTM. But but still, tires are the ones that come back. All the guys that you watch MotoGP. The biggest difference, they're all in the same tires, but some tire goes off more than others, and you can see the difference. So it's an interesting thing. Tires, they're for sure the major thing for racing motorcycles.
Okay, and are certain kind of bike configurations are more suitable for Pikes Peak and in general to climb a mountain? Like, would you choose an inline 4? Like, I remember one of the guys, actually, he won on a Z1000.
Yeah.
But mostly people are winning on V or V4s.
He won on the Z1000 when I hit the wall, unfortunately. You need it. I think V-twin is the best bike for Pikes Peak, personally. V-twin and V4. You need that instant go, and that's what made the KTM such a beast of a thing there, because it has such huge torque, such immediate, like, boom, get you off the corner. The top speed is not that gnarly at Pikes. It's only about 145, maybe 150 mile an hour at best. You're not going that fast. So you're dealing with getting off the corner, like punching off the corner faster than what you normally than what you can on any other bike. So if you're looking like a Multistrada, that was a very good bike for that sort of style event, because you have such tight hairpins, and so it's just drag racing. It's just and you got to get that punch off the corner. Yamaha's MT10 would have been a really good bike there. That cross-plane crank, even though it is an inline 4, I mean, that sort of mimics the power delivery of a V4 in some ways. That would have been a very good bike too. This is for the heavyweight class, mind you. For the smaller classes, I couldn't tell you. I mean, I guess it would also come down to things like maybe a Triumph Triple, or but I think inline 4s for the most part. That's why we never saw a GSX 1000S there, even though they're quite a good bike. And very, very tunable as well, those bikes. We never saw CB 1000s there. We saw Aprilias and Ducatis and KTMs and things like that.
All right. So, just very briefly, do you think that this sort of thing can happen in Australia?
Nah. No way. You know as good as anybody, Sonny, that Australia is the nanny state. We don't, that kind of stuff just It's not going to happen. And look, I understand it too, because it is so dangerous. We can't hold bike races at Mount Panorama, let alone doing something like this. There was a gentleman, I can't remember his name, but he came and visited me. He's from Australia, and he wanted to start a race that was, I think, 30 kilometres long in New South Wales up the Oxley Highway. And I was just like, you're mad. It's not going to work. Pikes works because of the history. If you tried to start Pikes Peak now in this current climate, in terms of the insurance and all that kind of stuff, you just get laughed out of the room. The only reason Pikes Peak is still going, same with the Isle of Man, the only reason that all that stuff is still going is because it's always been going. That's the way those things work. It's a bit like motorcycling now. Imagine if motorcycling never existed, and in this day and age and litigation, you tried to introduce motorcycling to the world. They'd just be like, no. It's too dangerous. There's no way I could ever envisage something like that happening in Australia, even 20, 30 years ago. But I mean, I count myself very, very lucky to have experienced it and done it. Who knows? Maybe I'll be the last one that wins it. I hope not. I hope they restart the thing, and I hope someone goes quicker than me. I don't want to ever be the last one to win for anything. I want to see that thing keep going, because it is such an amazing event. It's such a different thing. Like, it's so out there in terms of, like, when you go and see that, John, you're like, shit, we're going to go racing up that. Like, it's wild. So yeah, it's almost like those Final Frontier kind of deals. And unfortunately, they have stopped it for bikes. Hopefully, they do restart it, but again, I can't see it happening.
All right, Rennie. So a couple of more questions. One is that what do you think about racing with electric motorcycles? Because apparently, it's going to happen sometime or the other in the future. Very
sure.
near future.
I think electric bikes are great. I mean, I've been a little critical on electric bikes because I feel like I'm not critical on electric bikes, but the electric bike segment, because it kind of feels like a lot of the manufacturers are dragging their heels, or they are. You go into the car world, and all the major car manufacturers have all got electric vehicles. I want to see electric bikes get going, because unfortunately, I mean, I'm an internal combustion engine guy. Like, I love the sound and the feel and everything about a motorcycle engine. But we are at such a point now with the internal combustion engine, be it car, bike, truck, plane, whatever, you can't get that much more out of them. Well, you just can't. They're at their end in terms of their ability to be able to, constantly reinvent themselves and all that. The biggest breakthrough in technology is going to come through electric motorcycles. Electric motorcycles, as they currently are not viable. Charge times are way, way, way too long. Until they get to, they're also a little bit heavy. The handling is not great. Until they get to the stage where a motorcycle can get filled up in about the same time that it takes you to fill up your tank, which is probably going to be quite a while, then they're not going to become majorly, I guess, accepted in the mainstream. But that's not to say that they shouldn't. I really like the idea of the electric bikes. I like the fact that exposes the kind of riding that I like to and more people, I guess. I also really, really am excited about the whole e-mobility thing. I think that stuff's great. Like, I would love to see people on little scooters and e-bikes or whatever you want to call them, tearing around and getting to work. And I would way prefer to see people riding little e-bike scooters than being on the train. Like, at least you're having a ride to work. And if that's how you do it, then cool, that's how you do it. But I think electric bikes, they will in the next few years. I mean, I know Kawasaki is working on one now, which is going to be pretty cool. That's probably not going to come out for a few years, but the Japanese manufacturers, even though they're not doing stuff, they are doing stuff. Like, they're not stupid. They're not just going to sit on their hands and say, oh, we're just going to wait for other people to do it. I know Ducati has been looking very closely at this space. KTM has obviously been leading in it in a way with the free ride e-bikes. Zero out here as well. Harley Davidson with the live wire. There's the new Damon motorcycle, which is really cool. There's a whole bunch of things that are now that give you impetus to be excited about this kind of thing, and we have to get excited about it because there's not going to be any innovation in other areas.
All right, Rennie, last question is that who's your idol and how do you want to be remembered as?
I suppose, it's a tough one. I suppose my hero was always Wayne Rainey. I always loved how that guy carried himself, especially after his accident. And in the last couple of years, excuse me, my nose a bit twitchy. In the last couple of years, I've got to know him through Moto America, just on a professional level, and he's a lovely, lovely guy. Really, really nice dude, and just a badass on a motorcycle. Like the way that he rode the 500s when they were at their nastiest and excelled at it. So it shows what kind of a rider the guy really is. I guess, who knows? I've never been asked that question. How do you want to be remembered? But I guess just as someone that was like, "Fuck it, let's do it." Maybe that's the best way. Maybe that should be my tagline on my gravestone. But it was everything that's been good for me in the last, especially 15 years or so, has always just been like, well, what's the worst that could happen? And it's led me to some pretty amazing experiences and met a lot of cool people. And but I guess the main thing was always like, I guess if you want to say it, like, it's just be good to be remembered as somebody that had a go. You never achieve anything by sitting on your backside and watching other people do it. You got to go out there and give it a go. And I never would have ever dreamed that 5 years ago or 6 years ago when I was sitting in Sydney that I would be sitting in America in a house in the States, but surrounded by a whole bunch of motorcycles, having had a career as a journalist in the US. And that all came about was because I was like, well, okay, what have I got holding myself here? May as well go. And it's amazing where life takes you if you kind of have a bit of an open mind.
Well, that's an amazing story because, a lot of people, they want to be like journalists because they want to travel the world. They want to ride the best motorcycles and do all these kind of things. But not all of them are fast as you. So I hope you know what you have. And at that note, guys who are watching, I would like you to go to YouTube and have a look at this video. You can just type in Rennie's Casebrook and Pikes Peak motorcycle lap record, and probably you can see how actually fast he is from a first perspective perspective. And so let me remove this. Yeah. So Rennie, I hope the next time I'm talking to you is when you have come successfully from the Isle of Man. And that would be the next year.
Yep.
And unfortunately, with everything that is going on, the economy is taking a hit. There are motorcycle racers who are at home playing guitar and stuff like that. It's really bad, and it shouldn't be happening to the machines or to the riders. But, thank you so much for taking our time on this morning. I don't think that it matters. It's a Wednesday, Sunday. I think every day of the week today is, in these days, is just the same.
All the same.
Yeah. And, before we just say bye to you, can you quickly take us through the bikes that, are there in your garage?
Yeah, well, I'll have to pick up the computer.
You're on a laptop.
Yeah. So that's the Supermoto, which is that's my little play bike. It's actually the only motorcycle that I own at the moment. I've sold everything else, but I have a bunch of other ones here, which this was. There we go. So that's the practice race bike, CBR 600 race bike that I've been cruising around on. I've done a couple of races there, sit next to a lawnmower of all things. And then got a Honda Monkey bike there, which I'm not actually sure why I've got, but I'm just going to be testing that for a little bit. And then if we go over to here, Suzuki Katana, which I've been riding around the street on of late, which has been been a bit of fun. And then we go over here. We have sorry about the light, but yeah, we've got an R1M sitting there, Yamaha R1M, and that thing is a bit of an animal as well. So
Amazing.
What we've got at the moment. Hopefully today we're going to be getting a Royal Enfield Himalayan, and we're going to do a bit of testing on that. And we'll get on and do the next one.
Rennie, it was a pleasure speaking to you, but I still have to show one photo before we go, because I think it's very close to your heart. This one.
Oh, yeah.
So when you're interviewing Nicky Hayden. So, it's just that, there are two people now that we see, like, along with Colin, that actually motorcycle racing has claimed. So I really hope that you stay safe. And that's what I can say. Motorcycling as is dangerous on the road, but when you're racing, I think. And before we leave, what kind of advice would you want to give, especially to the youngsters, if they want to take up racing? And a lot of youngsters, they ultimate for them is to go into MotoGP or WSBK, and now probably the Pikes Peak or the Isle of Man. But just a few tips of advice on how to focus, what kind of sacrifices on the way, for them. They can do something.
I mean, I would always say, I always suggest if somebody wants to go racing that they should do it. For me, racing has given me so much in terms of, obviously the enjoyment is the obvious one, but it's also a lot of the other things, as you say, like the preparation and the sacrifice and that kind of stuff gives you something to aim for, I guess. The big races, like MotoGP and World Superbike, I mean, a lot of the guys that don't know about racing, they just think, I'm going to go and do World Championship stuff or whatever it is. And it should never be the end goal. I mean, you'll know within the first couple of laps if you're any good. There's been very few guys that have turned out to got to the world level that were terrible riders to begin with. They're always, pretty amazing guys. But they're the top 0.5% of more or less than that, only 0.1%. So if you to go racing, you go racing to give yourself a goal, to hit a certain time, to hit the right apex, to beat the guy that beat you last time or whatever. And that's what I've always aimed at with racing. They're little steps, and you get gives you something to work towards, and it gives you a bit of camaraderie as well. Like racing is fun. Like you go out and, I mean, when you're getting into big races, yes, the friendship gets put aside for a lot of the time. I mean, like the last week of Pikes, Colin and I, even though we had breakfast together one time, we weren't hanging out or anything. He was doing his thing and I was doing my thing. But when you're going racing with your buddies and all that kind of stuff, like that's fun, and it's really, really enjoyable. It's bloody expensive. Don't get me wrong, it's not cheap, but there are ways you can get around it. I mean, especially in India and that kind of stuff, the scene is getting quite good from what I'm sort of looking at from afar, and you guys have got a pretty amazing circuit. I think the Bud circuit is a pretty gnarly track, and so it's in and Southeast Asia in particular is really seeing a big uptake in the popularity of racing, especially in like Thailand and those kind of places. With the World Superbikes and MotoGP and all that kind of stuff there. So, but yeah, I would always recommend it. And look, racing, even though you're going faster, it's generally safer than riding on the road for the most part. You end up riding with guys in the same direction that all have the same goal, versus cars with a whole bunch of variables thrown in, trucks and kids and dogs and whatever else that's on the road. So it's a much more of a controlled situation. But yeah, for sure. I mean, I would always suggest, if you can afford it, don't break yourself financially, because you won't be happy outside of racing. If you got to be able to do it at a respectable level, whatever it is, and just go and do it. Go and get a scooter. Go and do those scooter races. Like, those things are wild. Like, there's plenty of races you can do. You don't have to race a World Superbike.
All right, Rennie, so thank you so much for that amazing talk. And I'm actually I also want to go and at least ride on Pikes Peak,
Yeah.
but definitely not race. So ladies and gentlemen, this is Rennie Scalesbrook and the winner of Pikes Peak 2019, and probably the future winner of Isle of Man 2020. All right, take care, Rennie, and it was great speaking to you. And all the best, and have a nice day.
Thanks a lot, man. Cheers.